Thank you. Thank you. Only two Tolkien fans? Lord of the Rings? You guys see the movie?
No.
What? All right. Well, then the metaphor falls flat. But so in this series of books that were written, that movies were created, it's Lord of the Rings, and there's this place called Middle Earth, which is Earth, and then there was the underworld, which was Mordor and all of this stuff. Again, I won't take too long since most of you don't know the reference at all. But there's heaven, there's the lower earth, and then there's earth. And what's cool about this whole story that Tolkien was a Christian, one of the best fiction writers of the 1900s, without question. What was beautiful about this whole thing is he was using fantasy, fiction, to articulate realities. That's what C.S. Lewis would do. If you've ever heard of C.S. Lewis would write fiction like Chronicles of Narnia. So I read Chronicles of Narnia when I was in sixth and seventh grade, and I gave my life to Christ. I mean, none of my family was really Christian, but because he was awakening me to this reality that was higher than the reality I was living. I remember standing outside my grandma's house after I'd read the series, and I was looking up to the sky and be like, there has to be more to life. Like, life has to be more than this. Isn't there something like? And I didn't even know who I was talking to, right? Because I didn't know God. I didn't know. I grew up in a hippie house. I grew up in definitely a very non-Christian of a house you can grow up in. That's what I grew up in. So the question wasn't even to God, right? The question was to whoever. I don't even know. Well, the next day, I happened to be going to a doctor's appointment with my aunt, with her little boy, my cousin. And so I just said to her, I said, yeah, I was standing outside looking up to the sky and saying, there's got to be more to life than this. And she was this radical, born again, I didn't know what that meant, Christian, who said, oh, I can tell you what more there is. His name's Jesus. And I was like, okay, who's this? She shared with me. She said, do you want to receive Christ and be born again? I was like, sure. So I prayed, got born again, and then the rest of my life happened, and lots of crazy ups and downs and all that. Didn't change everything. Like, oh man, everything was like wonderful from that point on. But my point for saying all that is, this fictional book that I was reading made these things in my soul that didn't even know were there, started giving me language, like this other world. And I know there's something beyond what I'm currently experiencing. What is that? And it connected in some way to this, what Pascal would say is this ache in the soul, right? There's this gap in my soul that I can't meet, and I don't even know how to meet it. Well, Tolkien does the same thing in Lord of the Rings. He does is, you guys know, I've been hammering this idea of secular sacred divide. There are spiritual things, and there are things that aren't so spiritual. And so we create this really weird world, and the weird world looks like this. Do spiritual things on maybe Sunday. That's a spiritual day. And do spiritual things when you go to church, but all the rest of your stuff, like especially Thursdays and Fridays and Monday mornings, those are really just natural. That's the natural world. And it doesn't really apply to God. Well, that's the secular sacred divide. What Tolkien does in this beautiful kind of fantasy novel is he makes you connected to all the realms all at the same time. So you have earth, which you can feel, touch, taste, see, and you have the heavens, and you have the lower earth, and it's all real, right? You have demons and goblins, or whatever they would call them, and you had good magic, and you had evil, and it was all part of life. It wasn't like separate in these distinct parts. What we've done in the West is we've flattened earth. Christians have done it, and so have secularists. We flattened everything. What does that mean? We don't have a grid that there's a spiritual world, there's a natural world, and there's an interchange between all of it. And so I don't watch news, but if you watch news, is it encouraging or discouraging? Discouraging, right? Is it like life-giving? Is there all kinds of good stuff that you watch? Or is it like not good stuff, right? I mean, it's obvious, right? It's all bad. And if you really do deep dives into some of the darkest things in our culture, not just Western culture, but on the planet, it gets I mean, the stuff that's going on right now in our city, let alone in our planet, it gets super dark. If you don't have a grid like Middle Earth and higher heavens and lower Earth, if you don't have a grid that helps you understand that there's a natural world, a spiritual world, and they work together, it's like they work together. If you don't have a grid for evil, if you don't have a grid that there's literally an evil force with evil demons, literally dark angels, if you don't understand that, and if you have no grid for that, then you have a couple options, meaning your worldview forces you towards down a few paths. Path one is nihilism. Nihilism is there is no meaning, right? And that we live in a very nihilistic culture. So nihilism is basically who cares about anything because none of it makes sense. The evil and the pain and the suffering and all, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't it make sense? Because we have no grid, right? We have no capacity to understand how could all this stuff be happening to these women and children? How could quote unquote good people be doing this kind of evil behind the scenes, behind closed doors? How could all this deception and all of these, conspiracies, a huge thing these days, right? Why is it so big? Because we're so, we're left so blank around, I can't trust anybody. I can't trust my priest, my pastor, my president, my governor, my mayor, my doctor, can I trust anybody, right? And so we go nihilistic, which is you can't trust anything. Nothing really matters. And the reason you go nihilistic is because you don't have a grid that says, no, listen, guys, there is an evil force that is working to destroy your life. And he's really way smarter than you are to a multiplier of like 1,000. What does that mean? He knows how to take you out in all of these ways. So C.S. Lewis has a great quote, and it's out of a book where it's this interchange between a demon training another demon, and it's fiction, right? And what the demon says is the best thing you can do, our best defense, this is demon speaking, is to make people believe that we don't exist. Because if there is no evil, then they can have their way with you. And so this idea, and we've talked about it at different points, generational sin. Let me just tell you, if you don't believe that a generational curse passes down from you to your kids and your grandkids to a minimum of the third generation, you're completely naive. So, example, I have a friend, dear friend, who is leaving his wife at the exact time that his father, 20 years in, his father left his mom 20 years into the marriage at 40. I won't give the age because I don't want to give away that guy's, but at the same age. Like this guy is literally, in his marriage, they have problems just like all of us do, but it's beautiful, beautiful kids. And he's just like, peace. And he doesn't see the irony. I was just talking to him about it. I'm like, dude, what was the age of your dad? Blah, blah, blah. Well, how old are you? Same age. How long was your mom and dad married before he just said peace? Da, 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 da. How long have you been married to your wife? Exact same year. You think there's any coincidence? No. It's evil that passes down through generations, and there are evil spirits that work to empower our dumb decisions. And so you wonder, how could somebody continue to do these dumb things? Why would and I use similar illustrations because they make the point. Why would someone whose dad beat on her growing up, just was abusive, why would she marry someone that abuses her, get divorced finally once she has like 18 people come around her and have a confrontation? She finally gets out of that abusive marriage only to get into what? Another one to the tune of multiple, right? They must just be really dumb. We're all dumb, but there's evil. There's evil in the world that's empowering these things. Why do you and I do some of the things that we know we shouldn't do? Like we are dumb in certain areas. Other areas we know like just doing the same thing over again isn't, I don't want to keep doing the same thing. What we don't recognize is the power of generational curses. There's evil. So there's a guy named uh, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I think it's how you say it. And he wrote a book. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for writing a book basically of his experience in the Russian gulags, these prisons. And one of the phrases that I've tried to memorize is he says, "You're never closer to evil than when you think the dividing line of evil is between people, between political parties, between governments. You're never closer to evil when you think that's the line, and the line isn't in every human heart." Right? The line between good and evil is in your heart and my heart, right? That's where evil is. And the enemy of our souls, and whether you believe in Jesus or you're not sure where you're at with that, you have an enemy. Regardless of what you think about Jesus, you have an enemy. And his whole purpose is to make your family suck, is to make your life suck. That's his purpose. So when Jesus says, "I've come to give life and to give it to the full," what we as dumb Christians have done is spiritualize that statement. Oh, that means someday in heaven, that's when that kicks in. I'm going to say, no, that's not when that kicks in. Jesus is saying, I want to bring life into your life right here, right now. Where is the place of pain? Where are you struggling? Where are you suffering? Where's there difficulty? Where's all the stuff that's going wrong? That's where Jesus wants to come in. And that's where Middle Earth. So back to Tolkien. The beauty of Middle Earth is it's this whole idea that we live in a place called the planet, right? Earth, we're stepping on it. It's what God created. And he created everything that's around us. And he wants to redeem everything that you're a part of. He wants to redeem your marriage. He wants to redeem your family. He wants to redeem your relationship with your children, your work. So one of the curses that we love to emphasize is work. The interesting thing about work is that God created work before the fall. So again, some of this may not make sense, but I'll say it anyway. So there was this big thing called the fall that we like to focus on. After the fall, everything changed. Work sucks now, and life kind of sucks. And so now I'm looking forward to retirement, or I'm looking forward to the weekend. Wednesday, hump day, all that stuff, right? That's all rooted in a false understanding of work. Work was created by God. What's interesting is it says God worked. Well, if God worked, probably is a good thing. It says God worked 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. It says that he gave Adam, right, who we were created by, the garden to work. I've already told you this before, but work is the Hebrew word avoda, which if you read through the Old Testament, it's back and forth, whether is it work or is it worship? So the same Hebrew word means work and it means worship. What's my point? My point is God is trying to infuse the earth, everything that you can taste, see, feel, with spiritual life. He's not giving you a ticket to get you to heaven. He's giving you the kingdom, which is to enter into your soul, enter into the place of where you live, how you live. And that's the whole point when Jesus says, I've come to give you life. The enemy wants to kill you, wants to not kill you, kill you physically, sure, but he's much more pleased to just make your life a living hell, right? He wants to turn your children against you. He wants to turn you against your wife. He wants to turn you against yourself, so you do a bunch of stuff that really is harmful. And he wants to make you think that everything that God has is actually not that good. What's a great way to do that? Secular sacred divide. All the things that we really are into, our kids and sports and enjoyment and food and all that. He wants to separate that out so that your understanding of God is over here. And it's like, and so what ends up happening is we have a bunch of humanistic, materialistic Christians. So Christians who they believe their Christian side has to pray a lot, which prayer is awesome. Read the word a lot. You can't read the word enough, trust me. But we see that as the Christian side of the game. And over here, You reconciling with your son, one of you told me you went up to your son and apologized and did some stuff. That's the stuff. That's as spiritual as it gets. That's as glorifying to God. That's as kingdom as it gets. That's as heavenly as it gets, is going to a son, a spouse. A few of you have come up to me, literally two different people have said they have apologized to their ex-wives. That's kingdom. That's as spiritual as it gets. Now, being in the prayer closet, wonderful, great. Do more of that. But let's continue to be the kind of men who go and apologize for the things. That's kingdom. Let's be the kind of men that create a home that our children want to come back to. Create a home where our wives feel safe and heard. Create a home where there's peace when people come in the door. You know what? That takes freaking work. That takes you working on yourself, right? Our own anxieties, our own fears, our own insecurities. We have to work on that stuff. Well, guess what? Jesus is so into helping you in that stuff. But you're not going to say, Jesus, I invite you into the places of anxiety and anger and fear and worry and lust and greed, right? You're not going to invite him into that if A, you don't believe that he's actually interested in it, and B, you don't believe that he actually wants to do something in you even while you're a freaking mess. Says Mark 10, I desire mercy and not sacrifice because I've come to call the sinners to repentance, not the righteous. What does that mean? That means he's looking for those of us who recognize how broken we are. And when we recognize our brokenness, then he meets us in our brokenness. When we think we have to have our stuff together, we don't get any of him. When we think we have our stuff together, we don't get anything of him. But when we recognize, man, why do I keep doing this with my wife? Why do I keep treating her in that way? I never got into it, maybe I'll do it next week. When we start being poor in spirit, blessed are the poor in spirit. What's poor in spirit mean? You're humble. You recognize your own weakness. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Remember, kingdom of heaven isn't some future destination. Jesus says, the time is fulfilled. The kingdom of heaven is now. What's the kingdom of heaven? It's his presence and its power, his reconciliation, his healing, his wholeness. When we are poor in spirit with our children, another one of you talked about a child that you went to, like, that is the most beautiful way to see the kingdom of heaven break in, is you being poor in spirit, recognizing, I don't know why I keep yelling at you, son. I'm sorry. And you know how many times you should do it? However many times it takes until you stop losing your cool with your son or your daughter or your wife. Then he says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. What's mourn mean? Mourn is just a deep way of recognizing my own lack. You're mourning. You're like, oh my gosh, I keep doing the things that I don't want to do. When you really begin to mourn, but not lots of people mourn, but not in very healthy ways. Right? You ever know people who just all they do is complain and feel sorry and they're sad and they're always sad and it doesn't seem to be helping. It says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. It doesn't seem like they're getting comforted because they've been mourning for a long, long time. The mourning is when we recognize we're at the end of ourselves. And I'll end with this story. I remember, like it was literally yesterday, I was in a restaurant, Brio, over in Easton, sitting there at the restaurant, crying, mourning deeply because we were eating and I'd watched a father at the Banana Republic right across the way. Banana Republic's not there anymore, but there was a Banana Republic and I was in the Banana Republic and I was letting my wife get her clothes or whatever she was doing. And I was just standing there kind of waiting. And I was watching this dad interact with his two kids. And he was playing the dollar game and he was dropping the dollar and they had to like catch it in their finger. You know, you see that, and they couldn't catch it and drop on the floor. And I was watching him eye to eye with his kids. He was there. He was present, right? He was in the moment. He was loving that moment with his kids. He was right there, just connected. And I, in that moment, was so disconnected from my own kids because I'm thinking about this and I don't even know why. I don't even know why, but I just couldn't. I wanted to connect, but I couldn't do it. I was like so shut down, so broken, so this, so that. So I'm crying because I felt like it's impossible. There's no way I can become the kind of present father that I want to become. I've got this, that, I got this problem, I got all these things, and it's never going to happen. I'm just telling you now, it didn't happen overnight. But blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are the humble, those who recognize their own need and they have no capacity to change. You and you and you and you and I don't have any capacity to change. But when you begin to get humble and you begin to recognize that Jesus wants to meet you in that place of not being able to connect with your wife. So many of our wives complain, and they complain in the wrong ways. And they complain in ways that are rude, and they come at us and all this kind of stuff. You know why they do it though? I'm just telling you right now, if you begin to love them with the kind of love that you were created to love her with, her complaints would go like this. Been weak, just like I am. Let's mourn. God, I have no capacity to change in this area. But Jesus, help me to be the kind of man I want to be. Jesus, help me to be the kind of father I want to be. And as you begin, and it's a process, and it takes time, don't be a freaking wussy and do it once, and if it didn't work, stay at it. Stay in a soft spot. Stay in a humble place. Continue to repent to God. Repent to your wife, your children, whoever it is you need to repent to. Keep it up. And now today, when I look at my children, right? My 23, eye to eye with him. He's one of my best friends. My 6-month-old, I talk to lots of dads who are like, I don't know, I don't even know how to connect with my baby until they're about 3. You know, I get it. I used to be there. My 6-month-old, I just hold him, like look at him. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Why? Because Jesus is so real and so wanting to touch you and I in every place of need if we will be humble and 2, recognize he actually can do something in those places.